do a lot of things together. We can play cards and play checkers and watch television and walk crossword puzzle.
Hey, man, those are all things that old men do. I ain't no old man. I go out with chicks.
Think you know everything about Fred Sanford and his junk empire? Think again. Behind the catchphrases and fake heart attacks lurked childhood friends who became enemies, a tragic prophecy that came true, a generous pay-it-forward chain involving Robin Williams, and on-set actors who claimed they were high most of the time. From bizarre continuity errors to the eerie way life imitated art, this classic sitcom holds secrets stranger than fiction. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Sanford and Son. Fact 1. Red Fox's death. Early mirrored his signature gag.
Egwin, you hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
Throughout the entire run of Sanford and Son, one of the show's most beloved running gags involved Red Fox's character Fred Sanford clutching his chest and pretending to have a heart attack whenever things didn't go his way. He would look up at the sky and cry out to his deceased wife Elizabeth, shouting phrases like, "This is the big one, I'm coming to join you, honey." The audience always knew it was fake, and the joke worked perfectly every single time because Fred was such a dramatic character who would do anything to manipulate a situation in his favor. But in one of the most tragic and eerie ironies in television history, this signature comedy bit would become a haunting foreshadowing of Red Fox's actual death nearly 2 decades later. On October 11, 1991, Fox was rehearsing on the set of his new CBS sitcom, The Royal Family, alongside his longtime friend and co-star, Della Reese. According to Reese, Fox had been chatting with a reporter from Entertainment Tonight when a producer insisted he come to the set, even though the scene wasn't ready to shoot and Fox had no lines in it. Frustrated by being pulled away from the interview for no good reason, Fox performed his part of the scene, which involved walking across the back of a chair and then immediately collapsed to the floor. Because Fox was so famous for his fake heart attacks on Sanford and Son and was particularly skilled at physical comedy and pratfalls, nobody on set initially thought anything was wrong. The cast and crew assumed he was just clowning around and doing one of his classic routines. It wasn't until Fox failed to get up that Della Reese rushed to his side and heard him whisper, "Get my wife," twice. Only then did everyone realize this wasn't a joke. Paramedics were called, but the delay caused by everyone thinking it was just another performance may have cost precious time. Fox died at the hospital later that evening at the age of 68, having suffered a massive heart attack, just like his character had joked about for years. Fact 2. Best friends on screen were enemies off screen.
You ain't got to explain nothing to him.
Yes, I do. A joke is a joke. Why you always treat me like a criminal when I come over here, Mr. Sanford?
On Sanford and Son, Lamont Sanford and his buddy Rollo Lawson were inseparable best friends who got into all kinds of schemes and adventures together, but the actors playing them couldn't stand each other in real life. Demond Wilson, who played Lamont, revealed in a 2015 interview with iloveoldschoolmusic.com that Nathaniel Taylor, the actor who brought Rollo to life, never actually liked him at all. In fact, Wilson said the two hadn't seen or spoken to each other since 1977, right when the show ended its run on NBC. What makes this revelation even more bizarre is that viewers watching at home had absolutely no idea there was any bad blood between the two actors because their on-screen chemistry looked completely natural and genuine. Wilson explained the secret behind why they appeared to get along so well despite their real-life animosity, and his answer was pretty shocking. According to Wilson, he and Taylor seemed to have such good chemistry on screen because they were high most of the time during filming. The drugs apparently helped mask whatever tension existed between them and allowed them to perform their scenes together without the underlying hostility bleeding through into their performances. This behind-the-scenes reality stands in stark contrast to what audiences saw every week on their television screens, where Lamont and Rollo's friendship was one of the most authentic and believable relationships on the entire show. The two characters would hang out at the Sanford junkyard, go out on double dates together, and Rollo would frequently stop by to chat with Lamont about their latest plans or just to pass the time. Their banter and ease with each other made viewers believe they were watching two actors who were probably close friends off camera as well, but nothing could have been further from the truth. Wilson's candid admission about their relationship, or lack thereof, pulled back the curtain on one of the show's most surprising secrets and proved that sometimes the best acting happens when performers have to pretend to like each other despite their real feelings. Fact 3. Red Fox was Malcolm X's dishwasher buddy.
The wife dies and the husband follows, usually of a broken heart.
Long before Red Fox became the star of Sanford and Son, and decades before Malcolm Little transformed into the civil rights icon Malcolm X, these two future legends worked side by side washing dishes at a restaurant called Jimmy's Chicken Shack in Harlem during the 1940s. At the time, John Elroy Sanford, which was Red Fox's real name, had just arrived in New York City as a teenager trying to make it in show business, and he took whatever work he could find to survive. Malcolm Little, who would later become one of the most influential voices in American history, was also scraping by, doing the same humble work in the same kitchen. Both young men had reddish tints to their hair and complexion, which led to them being given matching nicknames based on their hometowns to tell them apart from each other. Fox was called Chicago Red because he had come from Chicago, while Malcolm was known as Detroit Red since he hailed from Detroit. The two became friends while working together in that Harlem restaurant. And years later, Malcolm X would write about his dishwashing buddy in his famous autobiography, co-written with Alex Haley. In that book, Malcolm X referred to his friend as Chicago Red and called him the funniest dishwasher on this earth, giving readers a glimpse into Fox's natural comedic talent that was already apparent even when he was washing dishes for a living. This connection between two men who would go on to become giants in completely different fields shows just how intertwined the paths of African American performers and activists were during that era in Harlem. While Malcolm X would dedicate his life to fighting for civil rights and social justice, Red Fox would channel his humor into groundbreaking comedy albums and eventually the role of Fred Sanford. But both started from the exact same place, working long hours in a kitchen just trying to make ends meet before anyone knew their names. Fact 4. NBC almost fired Aunt Esther before she became iconic.
Well, that's something you wouldn't understand. We have inner beauty.
Aunt Esther Anderson became one of the most beloved characters on Sanford and Son, famous for her Bible-toting righteousness and her legendary verbal battles with Fred Sanford, but she almost never made it past the first few rehearsals. LaWanda Page, who played Aunt Esther, had virtually no acting experience when she was cast on the show, and the producers quickly noticed that she was completely unfamiliar with how television production worked. During the early rehearsals, Page struggled with the technical aspects of performing for the camera, and one of the producers decided she wasn't going to work out and told Red Fox that they needed to fire her and hold new auditions for the role of Aunt Esther. Fox's response was immediate and forceful. He told the producers absolutely not, and he made it clear that if they fired LaWanda Page, he would walk away from the entire show. This wasn't just a random stand that Fox was taking to be difficult with the network. Page and Fox had been close friends since they were children growing up together in St. Louis, and Fox knew exactly what Page was capable of, even if the producers couldn't see it yet. In a 1974 interview with the New York Times, Page explained what happened next and gave credit to her old friend for saving her career before it even started. According to Page, Fox invited her over to his house and spent the entire day personally rehearsing with her, walking her through the technical requirements of performing on a television set, and helping her understand how to hit her marks and deliver her lines naturally for the camera. Page later said she was nervous because Fox had become such a big star by that point, but he just laughed at her concerns and worked patiently with her until she felt comfortable. When rehearsals resumed, Page's performance had transformed completely, and the producers backed down. Fox's loyalty and willingness to invest his own time in coaching his friend not only saved Page's job, but gave television audiences one of the most memorable characters in sitcom history. Fact 5. Red Fox paid for ink spots. Songs out of his own pocket.
Don't worry, Bubba. Don't worry. When I get finished, my neck will be hysterical.
Throughout Sanford and Son's entire run, one of Fred Sanford's most memorable quirks was his love for singing songs by the Ink Spots, a rhythm and blues vocal group that had gained international fame back in the 1930s and 1940s. Fred would break into these classic tunes at random moments throughout episodes, and it became such a beloved part of his character that fans looked forward to hearing which Ink Spots song he would croon next. His favorite seemed to be If I Didn't Care, which the Ink Spots had originally recorded and released in 1939 with lead vocals by Bill Kenny. And Fred sang it so often that it became almost like a second theme song for the show. What most viewers never knew was that this character trait wasn't just something the writers dreamed up for the show, but rather it came directly from Red Fox's own genuine passion for the Ink Spots and their music. Fox was such a huge fan of the group that he wanted his character to share that love. But there was one major problem that almost prevented Fred Sanford from ever singing a single note. The royalties for using Ink Spots songs were astronomically expensive, so much so that NBC flat out refused to pay the costs because they considered the price too high for what they saw as just a small character detail. Rather than let this aspect of his character disappear, Fox made an extraordinary decision that showed just how much he cared about staying true to his vision for Fred Sanford. He reached into his own pocket and paid for all the song royalties himself, spending thousands of dollars out of his personal salary over the course of the show's 6-season run, just so Fred could sing those beloved Ink Spots numbers. This meant that every single time viewers heard Fred Sanford belt out an Ink Spots tune, they were actually hearing something that Red Fox had personally financed because he believed it was that important to the character and refused to compromise on this detail even when the network wouldn't support it. Fact 6. The show started a $3,500 pay-it-forward chain to Robin Williams.
Take a number so you don't have to wait in line.
Now listen, Pop, I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say I'm a dummy and I don't know what I'm talking about, right?
Red Fox's generosity on the set of Sanford and Son ended up creating one of Hollywood's most heartwarming pay-it-forward stories that eventually reached the legendary Robin Williams. Fox had become close friends with Pat Morita, who played the character Ah Chew on the show, and would later become famous as Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid movies. When Morita found a foreclosed house that he wanted to buy but didn't have enough money for the down payment, he approached Fox in desperation to see if his friend could help him out with the purchase. Fox didn't hesitate for even a moment, and after joking around that he didn't carry small change, he pulled out his checkbook and wrote Morita a check for $3,500 right there on the spot. But Fox made it crystal clear that this wasn't a loan that needed to be paid back with interest or even at all. Instead, Fox told Morita that when the time came and he was in a position to help someone else who needed it, he should pay it forward to another person rather than paying Fox back. Morita never forgot that act of kindness and the lesson about helping others that came along with it. Years later, when Morita was in San Francisco, he went to a comedy club and watched a young, unknown comedian perform who was incredibly talented but struggling financially. That comedian was Robin Williams, who actually joked during his set about how broke he was and the money troubles he was facing as he tried to make it in the entertainment industry. After the show ended, Morita approached Williams, pulled out his checkbook, and wrote him a check for the exact same amount he had received from Fox, $3,500. Morita gave Williams the same instructions that Fox had given him, telling the young comedian to pay it forward when he got the chance. Williams went on to become one of the biggest stars in Hollywood and spent the rest of his life honoring that request by helping other comedians and actors throughout his career, keeping the chain of generosity alive. Fact 7. Friday night. Death Slot became must-see. TV.
I'm gonna have to think it over.
Pop, the bank closes in 20 minutes.
I thought it over.
In the television industry, Friday nights at 8 p.m. had long been considered the death slot for new shows because that was when most people were out at the movies, on dates, or attending social events instead of sitting at home watching TV. Network executives typically dumped shows they had little faith in into this time slot, essentially accepting that those programs would struggle to find an audience and would likely get canceled quickly. But Sanford and Son completely defied this conventional wisdom and turned what was supposed to be a graveyard shift into one of the most successful time slots in all of television during the 1970s. When the show premiered in January of 1972, it was placed in that dreaded Friday night 8 p.m. slot, and nobody really expected it to become a massive hit. However, Fred Sanford's outrageous antics and the show's genuine humor struck a chord with viewers across America, and the ratings climbed so high that the show reached number 6 in its very first shortened season. By the time the second season kicked off in September of 1972, Sanford and Son had become the number 2 rated show in all of television, trailing only behind All in the Family. The show's incredible success didn't just save itself from the death slot, it actually transformed NBC's entire Friday night lineup into a powerhouse block of programming. By the 1974 to 1975 season, Sanford and Son had become such a strong lead-in program that every single show airing on NBC's Friday night schedule managed to crack the top 15 most-watched programs in America. The lineup included Chico and the Man, right after Sanford, at 8:30, which ranked number 3 for the season, followed later in the evening by The Rockford Files at number 12 and Policewoman at number 15. This meant that NBC had turned Friday nights into their version of must-see TV, years before that phrase became associated with their Thursday night comedies. Sanford and Son proved that a truly great show could succeed anywhere on the schedule, even in a time slot where conventional wisdom said it was impossible to thrive. Fact 8. Red Fox was only 49, playing a 65-year-old.
What you doing over there? And one guy said, you don't know and you don't want to know.
When Sanford and Son premiered in 1972, viewers met Fred Sanford, a cantankerous 65-year-old junk dealer who seemed every bit his age with his gray hair, slow shuffle, and that distinctive wobbly walk that became part of the character's signature style. What most fans didn't realize was that Red Fox, the comedian bringing Fred to life, was actually only 49 years old when the show first aired, making him a full 16 years younger than the character he was portraying on screen every week. The transformation from a 49-year-old comedian to a believable 65-year-old curmudgeon required more than just good acting skills. Fox had to undergo a complete physical transformation to pull off the illusion, and he committed to it fully. He dyed his naturally reddish hair gray to match what a man in his mid-60s would look like, and the makeup department worked to add age lines and wrinkles to his face that would make him appear appropriately weathered and worn down by decades of running a junkyard business in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles. But perhaps the most interesting part of the transformation came from those heavy, clunky shoes that Fred Sanford wore in every episode. Fox specifically chose to wear these hefty shoes because they naturally created that slow, unsteady, wobbly walk that became one of Fred's most recognizable physical traits. Every time Fred shuffled across the junkyard or moved through his living room, those shoes were doing the work of adding years to his appearance and movement. Interestingly enough, Fox's hard-partying lifestyle off-camera actually helped sell the illusion of being much older than he really was. Years of living fast had already begun to age his appearance naturally, so the makeup department didn't have to work quite as hard as they might have with another actor. The combination of deliberate costume and makeup choices, along with the natural wear that came from Fox's own lifestyle, created a Fred Sanford who was completely believable as a man approaching 70, even though the actor inside was still in his 40s and had decades of performing left ahead of him. Fact 9, the show's name came from Red Fox's real family.
Don't worry about that. Just leave the stuff where it is because I don't care. It's just beautiful. Just leave it right there.
When Sanford and Son premiered on NBC in January of 1972, most viewers had no idea that the show's title carried deep personal meaning for its star. Red Fox wasn't just playing a character with a random name. He was honoring his own family history in ways that went far beyond simple casting choices. The truth is that Red Fox wasn't even his real name to begin with. The legendary comedian was born John Elroy Sanford on December 9, 1922, in St. Louis, Missouri, and he kept his birth surname alive by making it the centerpiece of one of television's most successful sitcoms. But the personal connections ran even deeper than that. When producers Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin were developing the American version of the British show Steptoe and Son, Fox specifically requested that his character be named Fred G. Sanford as a direct tribute to his older brother. Fred Sanford Jr. had died in 1965 at the age of 46, just 7 years before the show would make the Sanford name famous across America. By naming his junk dealer character after his late brother, Fox found a way to keep Fred's memory alive every single week in millions of households, turning what could have been just another sitcom role into something deeply meaningful and personal. The name Lamont wasn't chosen randomly either. Fox made sure that Demond Wilson's character would be named after Lamont Ousley, who had been Fox's bandmate back when they were teenagers performing together in a group called the Four Bonbons. This was long before Fox became the king of the party records, or a household name in comedy, back when he was just a kid with dreams of making it in show business. Even the character names of friends and supporting players throughout the series often reflected real people who had influenced Fox's life, making Sanford and Son not just a television show, but a living memorial to the relationships and experiences that shaped one of comedy's greatest talents. Fact 10. One episode got higher ratings without the star.
You can take that tree and them decorations on out of here because we ain't got no money to be spending on no foolishness.
Anything you say, Scrooge.
When Red Fox walked off the set of Sanford and Son during the third season in 1973, it created what should have been a disaster for NBC. The star of the show, the entire reason millions tuned in every Friday night, was gone over a bitter contract dispute that would drag on for months. Fox had been earning $19,000 per episode, which sounds like a fortune, but he wanted a 25% ownership stake in the series he had made into a ratings juggernaut. The producers at Tandem Productions weren't having it, and they slapped him with a $10 million lawsuit when he refused to show up for work. To keep the show on the air, the writers explained that Fred Sanford had gone to St. Louis to attend his cousin's funeral, and his friend Grady Wilson, played by Whitman Mayo, was left in charge of the junkyard and the house. What happened next probably made Red Fox more nervous than anything else in his career. The episode titled Once a Thief, which aired with Whitman Mayo carrying the show instead of Fox, pulled in the highest single episode rating in the entire history of Sanford and Son. The audience loved it. Here was proof that the show could survive, maybe even thrive, without its temperamental star. Grady wasn't just filling time until Fox came back. He was actually connecting with viewers in a way that made network executives realize they had options. For Fox, sitting at home fighting his legal battle, this had to be terrifying news. If the show could get its best ratings ever without him, what leverage did he really have? Eventually, Fox and the producers reached a settlement in June of 1974. He got his raise to match what Carol O'Connor was making on All in the Family, $25,000 per episode, plus that 25% of the producer's net profits he'd been demanding. But the success of Once a Thief had changed the power dynamic forever, and everyone on set knew it. Fact 11. The pilot outperformed the World Series.
I know, please. Just tell me more.
When Sanford and Son premiered on Friday, January 14, 1972, nobody at NBC could have predicted just how massive the show's debut would become. The pilot episode pulled in an absolutely staggering 52 ratings share, which meant that more than half of all televisions turned on at that time were tuned in to watch Fred and Lamont Sanford bicker in their junkyard. To put this in perspective, the show didn't just do well for a new sitcom debut, it actually outdrew the World Series that year, which was typically one of the most watched sporting events on television. This kind of instant success was practically unheard of for any show, let alone one that was taking a significant risk by featuring an almost entirely black cast. The show's explosive premiere made Sanford and Son the first series with a predominantly black cast to air on network television since Amos and Andy, which had ended its run way back in 1951, more than 2 decades earlier. That 21-year gap meant that an entire generation of viewers had never seen a sitcom centered around black characters in prime time, making Sanford and Son's debut a genuinely historic moment for American television. NBC executives had been nervous about how audiences would respond, especially since the show was positioned in what was known as the Friday night death slot, a time period where shows typically struggled to find viewers because people were out enjoying their weekend. But Red Fox's undeniable charisma and the show's sharp writing proved all the doubters wrong. Actor Demond Wilson, who played Lamont, later told Get TV that the ratings numbers were absolutely unheard of, explaining that a 52 share meant the show was capturing an enormous portion of the viewing audience right from the very beginning. The pilot's success immediately positioned Sanford and Son as NBC's answer to CBS's powerhouse All in the Family. And by the time Season 2 rolled around in September of 1972, the show had climbed even higher to become the number 2 rated show in all of television. Fact 12. Major continuity errors plagued the series.
Guess what they went straight for? What? Your piggy bank. My piggy bank. Yeah.
If you were a dedicated viewer of Sanford and Son during its original run from 1972 to 1977, you might have noticed something strange about the opening credits that never quite matched what you saw in the actual episodes. The exterior shot of the Sanford house and junkyard that appeared in those famous opening credits showed a building with the front door positioned almost flush against the street, with barely any front yard visible and very little junk scattered around the property. However, when viewers watched the actual episodes, the Sanford home had a completely different layout, featuring a huge, sprawling front yard, absolutely packed with piles and piles of junk everywhere, and the street was positioned much farther away from the front door than what the opening credits suggested. This wasn't just a minor difference either, as the 2 versions of the property looked so drastically different that it seemed like they might be entirely separate locations altogether. The continuity problems didn't stop with just the house exterior, though, as even basic facts about the main characters kept changing from season to season without any explanation. Both Fred and Lamont's birthdays shifted around constantly throughout the series run, with Fred's birthday sometimes being mentioned as happening in September, while other episodes claimed it occurred in December instead. Lamont's birthday jumped around even more unpredictably, with various episodes placing it in September, January, or February, depending on which season you happened to be watching at the time. These weren't just small mistakes that could be overlooked, but rather significant continuity errors that affected the timeline and ages of the central characters in ways that never got addressed or corrected. Perhaps the most amusing production error involved the opening credits sequence that remained essentially unchanged throughout the entire series. During the first 4 seasons, viewers could clearly see close-up shots of Lamont driving the iconic red pickup truck home, but the reflections visible on the truck's windshield told a completely different story. Anyone paying close attention could see that the reflections revealed the truck wasn't actually moving at all during filming, exposing the fact that these driving scenes were shot on a stationary soundstage rather than on real Los Angeles streets. Fact 13. Red Fox and LaWanda Page were childhood friends.
I'm always picking up a bargain.
How would you like to be picking your teeth up off the ground?
Most television viewers watching Sanford and Son assumed that the hilariously hostile relationship between Fred Sanford and his sister-in-law, Aunt Esther, was purely acting. But the real story behind Red Fox and LaWanda Page's connection made their on-screen battles even more remarkable. These two comedy legends weren't just co-stars who met during casting. They had actually known each other since they were pre-teens growing up together in St. Louis, Missouri, making their ability to portray such convincing animosity all the more impressive. Fox and Page's friendship stretched back decades before Sanford and Son ever aired, with the two having attended school together and grown up in the same neighborhood during their childhood years. When Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin were casting the show in the early 1970s, Fox already knew exactly who he wanted to play Aunt Esther, and LaWanda Page was his first and only choice for the role. The producers, however, weren't as confident in his selection because Page had virtually no on-camera acting experience at the time, having spent her career performing raunchy stand-up comedy in nightclubs rather than working in television. When the producers expressed serious concerns about Page's lack of television experience and actually wanted to fire her before the show even properly began, Fox wasn't having any of it. He threatened to walk away from the entire production if they let Page go, showing just how much loyalty he had to his longtime friend. To make sure Page succeeded and prove the producers wrong, Fox personally invited her to his house and spent an entire day rehearsing with her, coaching her through the nuances of performing for television cameras and a studio audience. Page later told interviewers that Fox's belief in her abilities never wavered, even when she felt nervous about stepping into such unfamiliar territory. And his support ultimately helped her create one of the most memorable characters in 1970s television history. Fact 14. The show killed the Brady Bunch.
And as you got older, it was cursed by Father Time.
When Sanford and Son premiered on NBC in January of 1972, it didn't just become a hit. It became a cultural phenomenon that completely changed the television landscape and left casualties in its wake. One of the most surprising victims of Fred Sanford's junkyard empire was none other than America's most wholesome family, the Brady Bunch, which had been running on ABC since 1969 and seemed like it would last forever with its cheerful stories about blended families and life lessons. The Brady Bunch had been doing reasonably well in the ratings for years, drawing in families every Friday night with their squeaky clean adventures and feel-good endings. But when Sanford and Son moved into the same Friday night time slot at 8 p.m., everything changed almost overnight. The edgy, groundbreaking comedy featuring Red Fox's sharp wit and the show's willingness to tackle controversial topics with humor created a viewing alternative that audiences couldn't resist, and people started abandoning the Brady family in droves to watch Fred Sanford's antics instead. The numbers told a devastating story for ABC. Sanford and Son's ratings were so strong that it peaked at number 2 in the Nielsen ratings, sitting just behind All in the Family, and it effectively dominated Friday nights in a way that caught everyone off guard. The competition was so fierce that the Brady Bunch simply couldn't compete with the raw appeal of Sanford and Son's style of comedy, which felt fresh and real compared to the Brady family's polished perfection. By 1974, just 2 years after Sanford and Son's debut, ABC made the difficult decision to cancel the Brady Bunch after 5 seasons. The irony wasn't lost on television insiders. A show about a junkyard dealer had essentially dismantled one of television's most beloved family sitcoms. Sanford and Son's success didn't just defeat the Brady Bunch in the ratings. It helped NBC build an entire powerhouse Friday night lineup that would dominate for years, while the Brady Bunch became a memory, later living on only through syndication and various reunion specials. Fact 15. Eddie Murphy paid for Red Fox's funeral.
Well, son, I got to thinking, maybe we didn't give it a chance.
When Red Fox died of a heart attack on October 11, 1991, his widow, Ka-Ho Cho, found herself in an impossible situation. Despite Fox having been one of the biggest stars in television, during the 1970s and earning what would be millions in today's money from Sanford and Son, she couldn't afford to give him a proper funeral. The reason came down to Fox's incredible generosity throughout his life, which had left him financially devastated by the time of his death. Fox had a reputation for being one of the most generous people in Hollywood, constantly helping friends and fellow comedians whenever they needed money. He paid for Pat Morita's house down payment, gave other struggling comics financial support, and never hesitated to share what he had. But this generosity came at a steep price. By 1989, the IRS had seized and auctioned off nearly all of his personal belongings due to massive tax debts. When he died just 2 years later, there was essentially nothing left. That's when Eddie Murphy stepped in to help. Murphy had cast Fox in his 1989 film Harlem Nights and considered him a friend and mentor. Without hesitation, Murphy covered all the costs for Fox's funeral, making sure it was the kind of star-studded, lavish send-off that the legendary comedian deserved. The funeral became a celebration of Fox's life and career, attended by Hollywood's biggest names who came to pay their respects to the man who had paved the way for so many black comedians. It was a final act of generosity that came full circle, with Murphy doing for Fox what Fox had done for countless others throughout his career. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew Fox well. He had spent his entire life giving to others, often to his own detriment, and in the end, someone had to give back to him. Murphy's gesture ensured that Red Fox, the king of party records, and the unforgettable Fred Sanford received a farewell worthy of his legacy.